After you moved back to Birmingham, what did you decide to do?
There's this college here that I was on the board briefly from 2011 to 2013. My neighbor asked me to join, and I joined it, and it was a financial wreck. And I eventually dropped because I was commuting to New York and Chicago and didn't have time to even go to the meetings, and I didn't want to be on the board of a college like that where I couldn't really get involved and do something. So I dropped, but I knew about it. They'd approached me a few years later about doing something, and I said to them, I'm commuting to New York and Chicago 4 days a week. I don't have time to do anything else. So I turned them down. But once we signed the deal with with Virtu to buy KCG, I called them up and said, so what's going on there? And they talked to me about some things, and I said, well, you know what I'd really like to do is I'd like to teach finance. And so I talked to the head of the business department, and she said, yeah, sure, you can teach investments. So I was enjoying it. And then they asked me to go back on the board, and I said, okay. So I was a student, trustee, and faculty member, which probably breaks the law. But anyway, I'm on the board. And 6 weeks later, the president quits. And so they asked me if I'd be interested. And to be honest, I really wasn't doing anything else. And it was a good way for me to kind of reintegrate in the community I grew up with. And a good way for me to try to figure out how to fix this place because it was still a financial mess. And I thought, this kind of thing, this is the best thing I could do to help my hometown. I think it'll be fun and it's an important institution. So I accepted. So December 18th, I became a college president.
What is the college, and how did the financial problems occur?
So the college is a liberal arts college called Birmingham Southern College. It's been around since 1856. And for many, many years, it was considered the best academic institution in the state. It's a Methodist college, but it's really not it's really a secular college. And it's many of Alabama's leaders have come out of the college over the years. It's never been well financed, but to put in perspective, in the year 2000, it had about $130 million endowment, about $20 million in debt. They had a terrific president, but he was here for 28 years. And I would tell this to him gently, that's too long. And the governance here wasn't very strong. And in fact, it was poor. When he left, and he was benevolent, but when he left, they brought a guy in who saw an opportunity to try to do something big. And if it didn't work, well, it wasn't his problem. It's sort of the old heads I win, tails you lose situation. So in 2005, he decided we needed to build out our campus and do a lot of things that would attract students and put us on the map and enable us to compete with other regional liberal arts colleges that we'd like to compete with, like Rhodes College in Memphis or Swanee or Center up in Kentucky or to a lesser extent, even Davidson in North Carolina. These are the kind of colleges we aspired to be like. Unfortunately, we didn't have the money to do this. And he did it right into the financial crisis, and they didn't even stop. They kept going. So by 2012, our debt was $68 million and our endowment was $48 million. And we've been struggling ever since. And when I took over, our debt and endowment were both around $40 million. And so now we're at a point where we're about out of room.
Who are some of the notable alumni of the college?
10% of the lawyers in Birmingham went undergrad here. Hundreds of doctors went undergrad here in the metropolitan area. About 57% of our graduates live in Alabama. It has been an institution where kids from small towns come here and it kind of opens their eyes to the world. It's been an institution where kids from blue collar backgrounds come here and end up going to law school and med school. And it's just been a great institution of upward mobility, as well as an institution for people more affluent, but don't go, for whatever reason, don't want to go far away from home and want to go to good schools. So that's kind of the purpose it served. The graduates here range from Howell Heflin, if you remember him, a senator from Alabama, Walker Hayes, who has that Applebee's song, I forgot what, Fancy Like. Um, the school has a long tradition of theater, so there's a lot of people on Broadway in various roles that have come from this college. Um, Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of entrepreneurs that have a huge amount of money to give to the college. We have lots of lawyers, lots of doctors, some politicians that you probably don't know, but people in Alabama on the Supreme Court or the Solicitor General for Alabama are some of our grads.
How have you tried to solve the college's problem?
The first thing I did is I tried to understand exactly what the problem was. I know we didn't have money, but where didn't we have money? And I looked at a bunch of other liberal arts colleges, ones that we wanted to be like, and ones that were financially stable. So I looked at Rhodes, I looked at Kenyon in Ohio, looked at Center, looked at Swanee, looked at a bunch of others. And I noticed that a reasonable draw on their endowment, around 5%, say, would cover 20% of their operating expenses. And if you go to the Ivy League, that number is more like 40. If you look at Amherst and Swarthmore, it's probably 40%. But these other colleges are doing fine. They're very stable. They've got good enrollment. But the fact is they have endowments big enough to weather the storm, endowments big enough so they don't have to live just on student revenues. Colleges that don't have endowments big enough to cover 20% of the operating expenses tended to be colleges that were in trouble, and they were getting worse, and they were doing things to get as many students there, but not necessarily maintaining the quality. They're almost behaving like they're for profit because they kind of had to be. They didn't have that 20% cushion, and you can't really. It's hard to compete on price in colleges because the dirty secret is the average student pays about $25,000 a year to go to college, a residential college, regardless of what the sticker price is. Now, some chumps like me pay the sticker price for my kids to go to college, but on average, it's about 25 grand a year everywhere, plus or minus 5 grand. And so the parents are smarter than people realize, and students are smarter. And so the financial flexibility is really not that great. You really, if you want to have a college that can stand by its mission and qualities, you need that financial stability. So once I realized that, I was like, well, our endowment can't come close to that. And I wanted to raise, and I thought we needed to raise about $200 million. I felt like if we had a $50 million budget, which is a little more than what it was at the time, we could draw 9 to 10 million a year, and we'd be in good shape. We wouldn't be Swarthmore, but we'd be in very good shape. So I went out to donors, and I realized that a lot of these donors were pretty angry with the college of spending all its money. A lot of these donors felt like they're throwing good money after bad, and they didn't want to give me any money. And I realized that we had to do two things. We had to set up a foundation with an extra level of governance so the president with the greatest idea couldn't raid the endowment. So we did that, and there's a foundation separate from the college that has 4 people from the college on the trustees, but 3 independent, and it would take 7 trustees to have a draw of 7 out of 7 to vote to have a draw of more than 5%. So we think we had that situated, and then we said we wouldn't take your funds until we got to 100 million pledged. And the idea there was if we got to 100 million, people would really believe we're fixing the college once and for all. And so we started making progress. I literally had 800 meetings with people over about 18 months. And about half of them ended up pledging about $46 million. But some of this was during COVID, and things were, it was kind of hard to operate as efficiently as we liked to then. And then coming out of COVID, and we were definitely a beneficiary of government largesse during COVID. But coming out of COVID, I realized that we only had funds to really last one more year because we hadn't raised enough of the endowment fast enough, and that's when I realized I needed to go to the government to buy some time. But the real answer to your question is we needed an endowment of at least 150, but more like 200. I felt like if we did that, we could stabilize things. I felt like our offering was unique enough that we could stabilize our enrollment, but it all came down to endowment.
You asked the government for help. What was their response?
I went to Washington, and one of our senators, Shelby, was about to retire, and he was head of appropriations, and everyone said, go to Shelby. So I went to Shelby, and he looked at me like, I mean, I'd met him several times because he used to be head of banking, and my dad knew him. And he said, well, he didn't say it, but he basically said, I've got a list of about 25 people I got to take care of on the way out of here. I've never really dealt with you, and you're not getting on that list. And that's the way it felt. And I think that was basically accurate. And so I didn't get a dime out of Shelby. In Shelby, every public university in the state has a Shelby building. But in any case, I'm not knocking him. He just wasn't going to give me any money. And but they said something interesting to me, both Shelby's office and in every office of the Alabama delegation. They said, you got to go to Montgomery, which is our capital. They have a ton of money there. And I said, never in my life have I ever heard Montgomery had a ton of money, but I did go there and they had a ton of money. They had a ton of ARPA money, and they had a ton of money because Alabama's unemployment has been like 2.5%. And so a lot of the tax revenues are much higher than anyone had ever seen before. So I go there, I try to get some of the ARPA money, I completely get denied. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure why, other than I don't think the governor wanted to give us any money. But we did qualify, and we could have qualified for probably, I can't remember the exact number, it was about 15 million, and we really needed about 30. So I didn't get any from the governor, so that meant I had to go to the legislature and get a bill written. And the Education Trust Fund, which is all the revenue put together to pay for education in the state, was overfunded by about 2.8 billion on a budget of about 8.2. And that's a huge overfunding. And so we went and we worked with our legislative friends, including an alum who was very powerful in Montgomery. And we got a bill for them to lend us 30 million at a really good terms. And they managed to get the governor to sign it. And that was in June. And so that would have been, had they released the money in June after they signed it, I think we would have gotten the city to give us 5, which they eventually did anyway, and maybe the county to give us 2.5, which we're still working on. And we would have more than enough money to get through the next 3 years, and I think we could have finished this endowment raise. But the governor didn't want us to have any of this money. And basically, she and a group of people didn't want to block the bill because that would have had political ramifications, especially given one of our alums is very powerful. He can literally block any legislation that goes to the Senate floor. But she didn't want us to have any money. And so she got the treasurer basically to drag out the application till the end of August. The treasurer knew our cash flows and knew we ran out of money in October. So in the middle of October, he denies the loan. And we had to scramble to make sure we have enough money to get through the end of this year, which we do. But in any case, that was basically what happened. I thought we had everything resolved in June. And so did everybody else, including our creditors and everyone else. So now I'm in a position to either figure out how to redo the bill in the next 3 weeks and try to get a bill passed as quickly as possible so they will release the funds, or look for some other angle to keep the college open. But to be blunt, it's both of them are tall orders, and we don't have a huge amount of time.
What are some other solutions?
We've been talking to foundations and people for a couple of years. It's hard to get someone not from here just generically interested in helping us. We've explored the opportunity of mergers, but mergers, they don't really work very well in higher ed, and we don't offer what someone might want in a merger. I'll give an example. Northeastern bought Mills College in Oakland. I forgot what they paid, but it was like a promise of like, I don't know, 200 million or 150 million or something, maybe even less. And they got real estate worth $1 billion, and they got an art collection worth well over 100 million. And so, we we can't offer anything. And if we could, we'd be selling the art collection, keeping the college going. But so mergers are very strange. They end up basically real estate acquisitions, and I have talked to probably 20 different universities, and it doesn't make sense. But there is something that intrigued me that I thought maybe is a long shot, but could be interesting. I've gotten to know the University of Austin and their president, Penno Canellis, who's a great guy. University of Austin really started about 2.5 to 3 years ago. It's an idea to take on the elite colleges and universities that are becoming, in some people's views, a bit myopic in how they view the world, and in particular, uh, how they don't build. There's not academic environments of free speech and freedom of inquiry the way there used to be. And so a group of donors have gotten together, and Panos came from St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, and they started the University of Austin. And it's backed by the Hoover Institute. It's got an incredible advisory board. I would Google UATX and read about it, and it's got, great ideas. They have, I think, 500 acres in Austin to build a campus, and I know they've raised probably at least $300 million, but I think they're scratching the surface of what's behind them. And I think they probably will, in 10 years' time, challenge the elite and hopefully make the elite better through competition. Now, especially given what's happened in the last 3 months at Harvard and Penn and my alma mater and others, I do think the only way the elite's going to change is if they're challenged. You can argue with tenured faculty all you want, or the trustees and corporations. I mean, they have minimal obligations of transparency, much less anything else. And so the only way to challenge these institutions is to challenge them for preeminence and relevance. And maybe UATX will do it, but there could be an opportunity to do it here, and I'll explain. Because the college is on the precipice, but it is functioning and it's a good school, an injection could really turn it around. And if someone wanted to create an additional college like UATX, maybe slightly different, but basic idea, you could do it for a third of the price and in half the time because we're already accredited. And so the model would be, if we got a group of investors together, and I say that loosely because we're not giving the money back, to raise about $100 million. I think in a year and a half, we could deliver a college with a $200 million endowment, with $100 million plus or minus campus, 192 acres, 1.1 million square feet. I bet we could get enrollment to 1,000, which is not where it needs to be, but I bet we could get there. And I think that we could deliver this with new bylaws, and it could be basically the cornerstone of something that could be great. My own personal view is that this college should have two things. It should focus on things that you can't do on the internet, i.e. focus on small classrooms, tutorial types like Oxford and Cambridge, and try to do something where students can do whatever they want with AI. But when they read their paper to their tutor, they get grilled, and they have to be able to defend it, and they have to be able to understand it. And so a lot of people talk about the internet displacing colleges, and I do think it will with respect to large lectures, because you might as well watch that on TV. But the personal relationships and the discourse you can have with a group of people in a room of 15, I do think is priceless, and I think is lost at almost all major colleges and universities around the country. So that to me would be something that we could offer. I'd also demand efficiency on the administrative side, straight through processing on everything we could do, and make sure that we have fewer administrators than we do academics. My alma mater allegedly has as many administrators as it does students. And so hopefully we can show a different model there. But the other thing I think is really important, and I think back to my career, if I'm an English major graduating Yale today and I wanted to go to Jane Street, I don't think they'd hire me. even if they like me, because I can't program. And I don't know really the ins and outs of what's now become data science. So I think a core curriculum of about 6 courses in math, statistics, a couple of programming classes, a couple of classes perhaps focused on the issues of dealing and accessing large data, I think is going to be really important in the future for every business we're in. And we've seen it first in finance, but it's in every business now, and it's in every area of scholarship now. So I think I like the idea of a liberal arts college where, Western thought and freedom of speech, kind of what UATX is doing. But I really like the idea of having core curriculum so our students have the tools to really leverage what's available now, regardless of what field they go in. And then I like the personalized relationship. Those are things I would envision. If we had a group of donors who wanted to take this on and their vision were different, I would go with a group of donors. But I do think these things are missing from higher ed. So if anyone knows anyone who's interested in this, please let me know. I have reached out to a lot of people, and I know it's a whole lot of money. But I know several people who've canceled that much money at Penn and Harvard and are really mad. And I think it could be an opportunity to do something in an important way to change higher education.
What do you think your Chicago Trading Group experience helped bring to the college presidency role?
I do think the desire for clarity on what the problem is was really important, and I'm not sure that anyone had really sought it. I'm not even sure people really wanted to know to some extent. But when I looked at previous business plans and things about the college, I just thought they're barking up the wrong tree. So I think that this idea of clarity and optimization that's kind of beaten into you as a young trader or senior clerk, and is just so important. And then there's something I always try to live by, and for better or for worse, what happens to Birmingham Southern will reflect this. But at O'Connor, and I'm sure at many trading firms, if you made a bad decision, man, you were in trouble. If you made a good decision and lost money, you're not in trouble. And I think that's something that's really important, because in the long run you're going to be fine, but you got to make the good decisions, and you got to have the thought process and do the right thing, and it'll work out eventually. But sometimes it's hard when things aren't going well, but you just gotta stick with it. And so I think learning that early in my career has been really, really important.